recording of this webcast will be made available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS webcast archives. And with that, I'd like to turn the webcast over to John.
Thanks, Jessica. A quick preview of our agenda. You may have heard of one or both of these tools prior to today's webcast. Perhaps you've heard of Suricata but not Zeek, or Zeek but not Suricata. We'll be covering both tools so you get a good baseline understanding of each. And then we'll be diving into kind of the meat of today's presentation, which is really how these tools together are really can drive great outcomes, and they're better together. And so we'll be walking you through some technical joint use cases of these two tools. We'll be closing with a brief word from today's sponsor, Corelight. I'll be kind of explaining our products and how we can help you deploy Zeek and Suricata in your own environment. And we'll close with a Q&A. As Jessica mentioned, feel free to ask questions during the broadcast, at any point. I'll see it there in the Q&A tab that I'll be monitoring, and we will save some time at the end to answer your questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex Kirk, who's going to give us a brief background on Suricata. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Let's just introduce today's speakers. Alex, perhaps you could give us some detail about your background.
Certainly, John. Thank you. So I spent 10 years with SourceFire's research team, writing snort signatures, picking apart malware, doing all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm excited to be back in a small company environment doing work with a very similar product in Suricata.
Excellent. Matt? You are muted, Matt. There we go.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, sorry. I had a little bit of noise I wanted to get past in the background there. Matt Bromley, everyone, with the SANS Institute. I've been on multiple webcasts with the Corelight folks here. Super excited to be back on with John and be here joined with Alex as well to walk you guys through some really, really awesome analysis features. And I think really the next level of network security monitoring, which in my opinion is where we need to be at. So excited to be here. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Matt. And as I mentioned, I'm John Gamble. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Corelight. And I've been with the company a couple years and represented a number of security products in the space. And I think Corelight's got a lot of really awesome, innovative stuff that we're going to talk about later in this presentation that I'm excited to tell you about. So with that, I will turn it over to Alex to talk about Suricata.
All right. Thanks, John. So again, for folks that might not be familiar, it looks like we're having just a bit of screen advance fun because we have skipped a slide there, so apologies. Suricata is a pretty widely deployed open source IDS, IPS tool. It sprang from roots very closely associated with snorts about 10 years ago. It is, again, in that open source GPL specific kind of heritage similar to snorts. But freely available to the community and definitely has a large following of folks out in the open source world as a result of that openness. The kind of primary use case around Suricata is to have alerts generated on your network traffic based upon a set of signatures that you can load from any of a number of commercial providers, open source communities, intelligence feeds, etc. And all of that data is going to be output as JSON primarily for enterprise environments. It's possible to do ASCII output as well for smaller shops. But typically, this data is going to be passed off into the SIM of a SOC's choice to be viewed as part of a broader set of network data as opposed to necessarily being confined to an individual console. In particular, because there's so much of that surrounding data that is often necessary to make sense of the alerts coming out of Suricata and decide about their actionability. So it's definitely an important piece of the security stack, but not a standalone tool necessarily on its own if done properly in the wild. Now, in terms of actually deploying it from an open source perspective, you're going to have to go out and acquire some kind of hardware to put it on. White box hardware will absolutely do the job for sub-gigabit kind of throughputs, although things get more complicated as you get into very large enterprise networks, that 10 gig link kind of segment and above. There are pre-built packages available through apt or yum on your Linux flavor of choice, but since those packages can sometimes lag what is current and don't give you the option to compile in things like signature performance profiling, for example. A lot of folks will actually build this tool from source, from scratch, to make sure they've got it customized to their liking. From there, you have to actually go and get some kind of a signature set. There's not a default set that comes directly with the Suricata distribution, although there are several sets that are known out in the wild that are often easily associated. You're going to have to take that step yourself of setting that up and making it happen. You're going to have to find some kind of a way to get packets into the environment. And while it is possible to run Suricata in inline mode, a lot of folks will hang it off of a packet broker or a span or a tap so that it's out of band and doesn't have the possibility of causing network disruption with any kind of latency or potential false positive out of the signatures. From there, you're going to have to figure out how to do the mechanics of actually exporting into a SIM, which can sometimes be a bit of a complicated process with things like Kafka buses or Elasticsearch ingest or you name it. And then once you actually have the data in that SIM, then there's the ongoing process of tuning those signatures, seeing which ones are reliable in your environment and which ones may make less sense for the setup that you've got, and keeping those tuned to a point where you're not only performing well, but you're giving reasonable, actionable data off to your analysts with that alert stream coming further down. So to talk a little bit about a sample alert that you would get in Suricata, there's a decent amount of metadata that is statically written in at signature time that tells you, the signature name. This one is a generic suspicious post to a dotted quad host, which is essentially the HTTP host being an IP address instead of a domain name with a fake browser user agent string in this particular case. But you're also going to see things like when it was originally created, when it was last updated, so that you can see if it's being actively developed. And then you'll get dynamic information as well based upon things like the source and the destination IP address, the ports that it was running over, the timestamp, etc. And one of the other things that's provided as an option in more modern versions of Suricata is some additional metadata that goes along with the alert. The Suricata project has said for a while that it's common to deploy side by side with metadata tools, and it's necessary to have some of these basic pieces of metadata in there in order to resolve alerts more quickly. And so independent of anything to do with Zeek, they've decided to include a subset of the metadata that is available within a more dedicated tool like Zeek to assist analysts in trying to come to a conclusion quickly. So that is kind of the high-level overview of Suricata there. I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Matt to talk about Zeek.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. And yes, Zeek, everyone, my favorite network security monitoring tool. John, I was thinking when we were putting this webcast together, I was thinking that we're going to get to a point where we're going to have to start to take away the formerly bro part, because everyone's going to forget that it was ever called bro. And it's going to be a very sad day when we put together a slide deck and say, I think we need to put this anymore. But for those of you who have been around and have definitely had experience with this tool before, you obviously know this as bro before it was renamed Zeek in 2018. A very, very, very tried and true, widely deployed network security monitoring